to this hour-long celebration of the INIA-CFANS UMN collaboration. And so it's a real pleasure for me to be here. This, I remember when this was signed in 1997. And for those of you that might not be fully familiar with the program, the objectives were really to establish long-term and short-term exchange of faculty and staff, programs related to research, and exchange of students, particularly graduate students. INIA and Uruguay have sent us many graduate students, and a number of our graduate students from the University of Minnesota have spent time in Uruguay. So today we actually only have an hour or so of programming to hear, and we have a number of folks to hear from. But I did want to just point out two things before we get it started. We did in our invitation put a link to a Kudo board, which enables you to upload a photo and a few comments. I saw that Justin Stanton, one of my former students who spent time in Uruguay, was active on that, and I put at least one thing up today. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that this is a way for us to reflect on the last 25 years, to think about invigorating the agreement, and to look forward to things that we can do perhaps over the next 25 or plus years. So it will be my job to try and keep folks to time. So I am going to cede some of my 10 minutes or so of time to Brian Burr to give an introduction to the celebration that we're having here today. And Brian Burr is the dean of the current College of Food, Agriculture and Natural Resource Sciences. And so with that, Brian, I will hand it over to you.
Hi, Ruth. Thanks for the introduction, and happy to welcome everyone. Both, I guess, locally would be the U.S. and distance would be Uruguay today. So welcome everyone for joining us. It's terrific that we have Zoom so we can do these more effectively. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for the whole meeting, but I'm certainly delighted to welcome you all and congratulate you for your 25 years, it sounds like, of collaboration. I see Dean Martin is on here. So welcome him, who was the instigator of this. And I did see and take a look at the memo that was signed back then to form this partnership. So it's always terrific to see these long-lasting relationships and talking. And as Ruth was saying, the exchange between the faculty and the research staff and students that have gone on in this. And just, it seems almost like a platitude, though, to recognize that it's a great reminder of the importance that we are in this global community here in the U.S. right now, in Minnesota. And actually 80% of the U.S., I think, I haven't looked at the drop maps this year, is facing climate difficulties from reduced rainfall this year, which is really extraordinary that we've never seen. And I just returned from South Africa recently. And of course, similar circumstances there, although a decent crop year, thankfully. And with Uruguay, I know in South America, fortunately right now, having good crop years. But it's always this reminder that we do work in certainly the agriculture and food system as a global environment. And these exchanges are really critical for those kinds of learnings, and particularly north to south now, as we look at some of these elements regarding pest disease issues. I noticed, Ruth was just talking about fusarium blight again this year, emerging in Africa, for example, and other places. And so, just this reminder that these are really critical for our students to engage and have that global perspective as they move out into the world, and recognizing we are clearly all in this together now as we move ahead. And thinking about particularly the big issues of food security and climate adaptation that I was just talking about. And it's clear in looking back at the materials I had that this has been one of those productive partnerships leading to research and certainly student engagements. So with all of that, I won't take a lot of your time. I know your time is short, so I just want to welcome our friends from Uruguay. Appreciate your partnership and support. Welcome all of you from the University of Minnesota who have been a partner in this long-term and shorter term for building this, and congratulate you all on the successful exchange. So with that, thank you, and I hope you have a productive session here today.
Thank you very much, Dean Burr. So with that, the next part of our program is Mary Buschetti, who has some time to talk about the University of Minnesota alumni and also going back to some of the start of this program, right? Introducing a little bit, yes.
Yeah.
Let's see.
You'll be on the big screen here.
You want to
Go to
admit
yours
to
a little
my-
bit, yeah.
Yes. Ooh. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I am the Director of Alumni and Constituent Relations in CFANS. And actually, before I share too much, I wanted to take a minute to share Tabare Abadi. How many of you know Tabare that are here in the room and on the screen? All right. So Tabare, I got to meet when he was working with the plant science symposiums here at the University of Minnesota, and got to see the work that he was doing to support our students. And he actually received recently the Borealis Award, the Alumni Service Award, for his work. And then he ended up joining our Alumni Society Board of Directors. And through that work, we are trying to find ways that we can better engage with our alums who are outside of the metro, because we tend to have a focus here in the Twin Cities. And that means even alums outside of Minnesota, outside of the state of Minnesota, but especially outside of the US. And so in his role on the alumni board, Tabare is like, I would like to build a better connection with alums who are in Uruguay, because we've had a really good experience at the University of Minnesota. And we started talking about the partnership, and he found the agreement. And what was really fun to find out is the person that signed the agreement from, at the time, the College of Ag, Food, and Environmental Sciences, and we can argue how that was pronounced, COAFs, was Mike Martin, who was actually the dean when I started in my job in 1996. And so when I found out about that, I called Martin and, oh, help me, Annie.
Oh, allow me.
And we might have your slide up on the screen for just a moment, Mike, but
Yeah, we
with
sure
that,
will.
I would like to turn the floor to you to share some remarks to your friends from Uruguay as you are part of creating this partnership.
Well, thank you very much, Mary, and thanks to all of you. I can't tell you how proud I am of what you have accomplished through this agreement over these 25 years. I remember it well. This was one of those opportunities that came along that we knew at the time we could not pass on, to create a relationship with, at the time, a relatively young and emerging research institute in Uruguay. And you never know for sure how these things will play themselves out, but it's clear from now, all that I've come to learn, that it's had an enormous impact and on our students, on their students, and on the relationship between the University of Minnesota, that institute, and that nation. I just want to note a couple of things, because I go back a very long way, not just to my dean's time, but I think you know, Mary, I entered the doctoral program there in 1974. So I've got almost 5 decades of relationship to think about. And this particular agreement, in my judgment, or at least I would make the case, is part of a long-term commitment that has characterized the college on behalf of the University of Minnesota for many, many decades, and that is to be a true global player. And this was another example of the commitment of the people in that college at that time and through these decades to being a major player well beyond the boundaries of Minnesota, well beyond the boundaries of the US. So for that, I've always been deeply appreciative and enormously respectful. I think today about 2 of the great internationalists that I came to know in my time there, Vernon Rutan and Norm Borlaug, whose names are on buildings, which I think is also indicative of what the University of Minnesota College, when I was there, Agriculture, Food, and Environmental Sciences, CFANS now, has meant not just to the people it serves, but to the larger university's image around the world. And I will share just one kind of personal appreciation for all of this. Maybe some of you recall, though it's been a long time, when I left Minnesota with a doctorate many, many years ago, I spent 15 years on the faculty at Oregon State. And because I came from the University of Minnesota, and because I came from the College of Agriculture at the University of Minnesota, I was invited to participate in international programs at Oregon State, including a fairly lengthy stint working on various projects with AID. And one of the, not only was that a privilege and an honor that I got because of the association, but here was what was most interesting to me. Whenever I went in the world for AID on a project, I always ran into a University of Minnesota connection, largely driven by your college. And so wherever I went, I felt as though I was immediately part of the team there. So what's come through time, including this specific project, is an image of the University of Minnesota as a partner and collaborator globally, and a partner and collaborator of the first order. And that's been characterized, at least as far as I can go back in the history of the place, and certainly in my own history with the college. It's a real unique and incredibly important connection and an incredibly important value that the college brings to everyone that participates and all of our colleagues around the globe. So I've been a proud Minnesota grad and was proud to serve as dean, but largely because great people made it a place you can be proud of. And this agreement, 25 years later, is another example of the pride you can take in the people who have driven this university, served this university, connected this university, your university, to the greater world. And Brian is exactly right. I believe we continue to face enormous challenges around the world. And if we can continue to build on these kinds of partnerships, we can at least believe we can have a meaningful impact. So I'm just dropping in to say hello, congratulations, but most certainly from a personal standpoint of view and from a professional point of view, thank you. Thank you for making this partnership with Uruguay and INIA and the people that are represented by both organizations so incredibly impactful. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for taking the time to join us today. One of the things I failed to mention is Mike is currently serving as the president of the Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers. And as you can imagine, he's been dealing with a lot of issues in the Fort Myers area post hurricane. And also, I understand, I hope, planning to retire and return, spend some more time back in Minnesota. So thank you, Mike, for taking the time. I also wanted to, in terms of being proud of our alums, I wanted to give a quick shout out. Since my role is alumni relations, we have the University of Minnesota has an award called the Distinguished Leadership Award for Internationals. And two of our Uruguayan alums, Sylvia, and also who you'll hear from a little bit later, and Ruben Echeverria, are two of the recipients of that Distinguished University Award that really make us proud. So congratulations to them. And then I also wanted to give a quick shout out for those of you that could see in the chat. We do have a University of Minnesota Minnesotan who happens to be in South America for Partners of the Uruguay, Partners of America's meeting, and is in Uruguay right now. So Student Mambank, thank you for joining us from Uruguay today. So back to you, Ruth.
Well, thank you very much. And it was a real pleasure to have you on the call, Mike Martin. You were the first dean when I was hired, which seems like a long time ago. And I was kind of under the spotlight for Fusarium headblight work at that time. And I remember you stopping by my office and lab on multiple occasions in the first few years I was on the faculty. I am now interim department head for plant pathology. So things change over 25 years.
Well, and I want you to know, Ruth, every time I stopped by as an economist, I could not understand what you were working on, but I was incredibly impressed. So every explanation you gave me was deeply impressive, even if I walked away not entirely sure what that was. But thank you for continuing on. It's great to see you all, and particularly to see old friends who date back to those days. Thank you very much.
Well, great. Well, thank you so very much. And so it's my real pleasure now to introduce Sylvia Pereira. Sylvia was my first graduate student, although I would argue that I learned as much from Sylvia as she did from me over the course of her graduate program. Sylvia did it, both her master's and her PhD programs here at the University of Minnesota. And so with that, I'm going to cede the floor to Sylvia to give an introduction to this partnership from the Uruguay side.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. That was a nice introduction, much more than what I expected. Can you see the presentation?
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to, well, it's needless to say that we are very grateful for this meeting. celebrating the 25 years of such a sustained and fruitful collaboration between the college and INIA. And I think we have gone far beyond what we expected at the beginning in 1997. I was starting my studies there, and Ruth was starting having her first students. Okay, so I'm going to go very quick through history, because sometimes when we go back, it's good sometimes to go back and see what we have built, so that we can get energy to go on and see more products of what we pursue. So for those that are not familiar with our country, it's a very small country. In fact, it's the second smallest in South America. It's part of the southern cone. It has a population of 3.5 million, which might be like, I always say that Uruguay is like Minnesota in many aspects. Our economy is mostly depending on agricultural products. We have others, but it has historically based on agriculture. And one of the main things to highlight here is that we have been encouraged to adopt economically and environmentally sustainable production systems. And I think this was one of the main contacts we have had in between these 2 decades and a half with the work we have done in collaboration with the university. And INIA is the main agricultural research institute here. Originally, it was a crop breeding and seed production institute back when it was founded in 1914. So it has more than 100 years old. It was reorganized in the 60s, always belonging to the government. But in 1989, a law was passed by the Congress here, and we were established as a public institute with a private duty. That means that we are co-founded and also co-ruled by farmers and the government. And our mission is mainly to generate and adapt knowledge and technologies to contribute to the sustainable development of the agricultural sector and the country, always considering, of course, policies and social inclusion and market and consumer demands, not very different from what the university and the college specifically is looking for. We have 5 experimental stations, one in the north. I will go very quick here because we have many presentations. One in the east, mainly dealing with rice. Another one in the north center, mainly dealing with extensive livestock production and forestry, among other areas of research. INIA Las Brujas, which is close to Montevideo, our capital, and deals with intensive plant production, and also other research areas, many labs like the biotechnology unit is located here. And finally, La Estanzuela, which is the oldest experimental station and deals mainly with crops and livestock, intensive livestock production and dairy production. So this is most of the research we do at INIA. It includes different production systems. You have them here in the upper part of the slide. We work on different production systems, and we also work in different areas which go across those production systems. And so this makes us researching on many areas such as citrus, dairy, family farm production, forestry, fruit, vegetable production, meat and wool production, pastures, forages. We are very intensively researching on environmental sustainability of all those production systems, and also we work with crops. Going a little bit on the background of before the assignment, the signature of this agreement, back in the 60s, we were we established a partnership between Minnesota and Uruguay as part of the Partners of America, in which each state in the States has a country in South America which is a partner. And we were lucky enough to have Minnesota as our partner. And this is working very well. I know Sue can provide much more information about this. Then we have several agreements. The University of Uruguay had an agreement many years ago with collaboration. Many students were part of the math program, mainly in the 80s and 90s, and came back with a lot of knowledge, especially in dairy production, that applied most of what they learned there in the program here in Uruguay. We also had students in the late 80s and early 90s in Minnesota that were founded, their graduate studies were funded by the Inter-American Development Bank. Most of them are now present here in the meeting, in this meeting. And in 1994, as we were very lucky to have Dion Statman visiting us as part of the oat touring he was doing in the Southern Cone here. And he never stopped since 1994. He had annual visits to our country, and every visit was really very fruitful. And I think he was very intelligent also in envisioning this agreement, which he was a key part of the agreement. We had several other visits, but I wanted to remark this fact that Dr. Statman was really very helpful in leading this. In 1997, also Tabaré and Roberto Diaz went to Minnesota to set the basis for the agreement signature. And then also in 1998 and until present, we have a cooperation between INIA and Fulbright. So in November 1997, and here you have both signatures, you can see Dr. Martin's signature exactly 25 years ago. The agreement of cooperation between what was COAFES by that time and INIA was signed to promote joint educational and research projects. So in the next Auroras Borealis, we wrote like a landmark, very brief note with Linda, talking about this agreement and all the potential we have with this. The types of activities we have in this agreement are mainly focused in three types: long-term and short-term exchanges of faculty and staff, mainly looking at visiting scientists in both ways, research collaborations, exchange of many things, including germplasm, and by that time, magazines and books. Now we have another type of exchange, and also other academic information in general activities. We also have activities related to programs like development of joint research programs or research collaboration, which we have been very actively working on this in a very sustained way in different areas, mostly in plant pathology, plant breeding, and some in soil, but mostly in plant pathology. And I think this is a nice point to highlight here, that by this meeting, we expect to open this type of activities to other areas, to new areas. We know we are both working on similar research areas far beyond Borlow Hall. And also a student, I think we have been very rich in this last activity, which is student exchange at graduate levels both ways, both in to pursue graduate studies in the university, as well as receiving interns in Uruguay and also in Minnesota. So I will not go over the procedures, but one of the main things was that an oversight committee was established from the very beginning, and it was very proactive, even when we still don't meet very often now, because unfortunately, two of those key persons, which were Dion and Dr. Peter Graham, are not among us now. We have been very close in terms of relationship. The agreement sets an annual work protocol, but I think we have not considered these many as an annual protocol, and we have gone very informal in this way. So I will stop here, and just saying, because I know Nora and Linda will talk about all what we have done in these 25 years, but I just wanted to highlight that more than 20 students from Uruguay have pursued graduate studies in the college, and most of us have stayed connected, whether we are in Uruguay or not, with the faculty in the college. And this means a strong interaction, which involves projects, grants, internships, many activities, and also academic visits in both ways. And with that, I will pass on to Dr. Walter Bethen, who is our Vice President of the Board of Directors in INIA, and we will talk later on, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good evening from Uruguay. Good afternoon from Minnesota. I'm Walter Bethen. I am actually my full-time job is in Columbia University in New York. I spent most of my life away from my country, from Uruguay. And a couple of years ago, I decided it was time to come back to my country and try to return some of all that I got from this beautiful place. And so I have the opportunity now to serve in the board of INIA. And during my entire career, I learned how important this type of exchanges are for every part involved. For students, especially from students in developed countries, to have the chance to spend some time in other places, in countries with a completely different production system, and as importantly, with completely different culture, is extremely good. We need people with open minds, with, you know, that are being educated, with a chance, with the opportunity to be exposed to different production systems, to different scientific systems, but also again to different cultures. I know that Nora will talk about the numbers right after me, but I know that this exchange has been extremely successful. I want to thank the University of Minnesota for having this program established. And on the other hand, I think that one of the things that I found out when I started to work again in Uruguay is that there's a few things for which exchanges like this can be extremely helpful for a university like yours. One is that I realized that, as you know, we scientists, researchers, are being more and more pressured to generate knowledge that can inform actual decisions and actual policies. And I had a very nice surprise to find that in Uruguay, that is a process that has been happening quite effectively, you know, with ups and downs, but there are very nice examples of how science informs actual decisions, actual policies, and I think it's something that I would encourage you to focus as part of this exchange. The other fact that I realized is that Uruguay is a small country, like Silvia was saying. It's a very stable country. It's you know, compared to other places where we have been working, it's a simple country, and that makes Uruguay as a great place for an observatory country. We think that with programs like the ones that we have with you guys, it's not only good for INIA and the University of Minnesota or for CFANS, it's good for the work that we do in other countries. I'll tell you a story that to me was pretty impressive. I can't even remember, I think it was a couple of years ago, Bill Gates tweeted or published, I don't know where, that the salvation for the world was to stop eating beef. And if you say that in Uruguay, that's almost like a mortal sin. You're sure that you're gonna get a lot of enemies immediately to say that. There was a lot of outrage. Now, the Ministry of Agriculture, I think, was a lot smarter than that. He said, you know what, let's invite this guy. Let's invite Bill Gates to come and see how the beef production happens in Uruguay. And of course, he wrote a letter, and of course, Bill Gates didn't answer. He wrote a second letter, and somebody had to answer. So finally, the Gates Foundation sent a delegation to Uruguay with the head of the livestock production systems and some pretty high officers, including Ruben, one of your alumnus, Ruben Echeverria. He's now working with the Gates Foundation. And so they were impressed with the way that the livestock production works in Uruguay, but they especially like the idea of using Uruguay as an observatory country where other scientists, but also policymakers can come and visit and find out how these processes of science informing policy work and what type of policies are being implemented. So that's the other element that I would encourage you to consider for the next following activities in this very nice collaboration. One is, again, using Uruguay as a place to study how science can inform policy, and another one is to maybe use Uruguay as a laboratory, as an observatory for the work that you guys do in other places of the world. So Once again, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to have this very nice collaboration with your college. And I know that it's we're gonna have at least another 25 years of very fruitful cooperation. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
So our next speaker on the program is Nora Altier from the Uruguay end. Do we have, I think Nora should be there. We don't-
I am
Very good. Here we go.
sharing my presentation.
Thank you.
Are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it is my pleasure to greet you all from Uruguay. And first of all, let me talk a little bit about myself, because I think that this is a story of people, a working net of people who push to meet and create opportunities which change their lives forever. So we could say that then the agreement in a way put the formal frame to this network that have been working previously. I arrived at the University of Minnesota in December 1990 to pursue my master degree. I was encouraged by Tabaré to go there with an internship of INIA and BID, part of a consortium of 5 universities. And in fact, I was the first student that INIA promoted to go to the University of Minnesota. I arrived with my older kids, Gabriela and Gonzalo, and we found a cold winter and snow everywhere. And I was told, welcome to Minnesota. So I got my master degree at March 1993, and then returned to Uruguay and continued for the PhD in a sandwich program. And I defended my PhD in June 1997. At that time, I have another girl, Laura, that was 2 years old. So I got the degree and another another child. Okay. I now would like to summarize the main activities that and achievements from the Uruguayan side. But as Silvia mentioned, there were several activities that took place before the agreement was signed. And I think a milestone was the first visit of Dion to Uruguay and INIA. That was November 1994. And at that time, Tabaré Abadi and myself were his hostess. Then during the following years, each November, Dion came back, November 1995, 96, 97, 1995 came Larry Smith, Nancy Elkin in 1997, Jim Roth. Then Tabaré and Roberto visited Minnesota in April 1997 to take, in a way that the agreement was taking shape. In August, Silvia Pereira and Juan Diaz started their graduate programs at the University of Minnesota. They were the following pioneers in this chain or network. And then at November 1997, when Dion came at that time, was the signature of the agreement. I will go very quickly because Sylvia had talked about this. The agreement means mutual interest in the development of joint education and research projects. And another key point, I think, it's to mention that the agreement spreads in other Uruguayan research institutions. I think once again would like to mention the word commitment, as Dr. Martins said. We can't live without talking about Dion. Dion was really a forerunner and a pioneer promoting this agreement. Peter Graham was an enthusiastic supporter. Linda and Ruth, I should say, have been always unconditional supporters and wholehearted with the agreement. And at that time, in the 90s, Tabaré was a visionary, a forward thinking that encouraged all of us to start walking this path. I will not talk again about the objectives, but I would like to give some numbers of the achievements. But numbers are just numbers. But anyway, I could say that more than 20 exchanges of scientists, including staff, EGS, advisor, professor, heads, have been part of the activities regarding the first part, the first objective, the long-term and short-term exchanges of faculty and staff. Taking into account the programs related to research activities, originally there were an important collaboration in cereal and forage breeding programs and plant protection in crops as wheat, barley, oats, and especially in plant pathology, the fusarium head blight, rust, actually bacterial diseases. I would say in 2005, maybe forest pathology and wood deterioration was another research area that started to be of mutual interest. And then later, maybe in 2008, I can remember, microbiome and soil health and soil microbiology started to be part of this research collaboration. If we move to the last objective, the exchange of students at graduate levels, we could say that more than 10 students from Uruguay went to the University of Minnesota to pursue graduate programs, formal graduate programs, and more than 10 students in both ways, the University of Minnesota and Uruguay or INIA to Minnesota, developed internship. Okay, I will not, it's impossible to mention all the people that have been part of this. So I decided to follow with some slides, I should say recreative picture slides, where you can search in a way like, where is Waldo? So, and I apologize that these pictures are biased to a little bit to plant pathology, but different people, staff, DGs, heads, advisors, professors have contributed to develop these joint educational programs and research projects. Several activities have been done at the University of Minnesota, as well as at INIA, at the different stations, and also at the University of the Republic, at the Instituto de Investigaciones Biológicas Clemente Estable, Facultad de Agronomía, Facultad de Química, Facultad de Ciencias, en fin. A lot of spread throughout the academic web in Uruguay. Main research areas as I have mentioned, develop kind of a path. I should say there is a forest pathology path that probably Carlos will mention later. Bob Blanchett was a key person in this path. There is another important one, or maybe the first one, the serial pathology path. And Ruth has been a key person, and Linda Kinkel also. And also I would like to share unique memories of meetings, defenses of master and PhD degrees, field trips, talks. Any one of these let us continue knitting this web, this network of people, research areas, and continue educational programs. I also would like to remember many classmates, Uruguayans and friends at that time. It's an important part of our life. I think this is something that all of us share. And finally, I would like to leave you with some take-home messages. I once more emphasize that the strength has been the people, receiving and giving opportunities. I think each student and scientist that in a way has been recipient of a key that then opens another path. That these paths are not linear, but part of a network. I think this is the consequence of being grateful and generous, and this means leaving a legacy. And finally, that giving a hand, it's important to make the other grow up. At this point, I would like to especially thank my children that today are women and men, grown up, who have been always my font of inspiration. And this picture has been taken in 1992, and Gabriela is helping Gonzalo, giving a hand to make him grow up, and Gonzalo is giving a hand to make Gabriela grow up. So with this, I leave my presentation.
I can share my screen, Ruth and Annie. And Nora, you're a tough act to follow, but I will do my best. Let me quick change it to.
Thank you, Linda.
I'm super happy to be here today. Still, when you think about Uruguay and Minnesota, it's not an obvious natural connection. But when I was a very young faculty member, in fact, the first semester I was at Minnesota and I taught, an older gentleman with white hair walked in and he said, "I'm taking your class." And that was my introduction to Dion, who was in fact a force of nature. And thinking of the Uruguay-Minnesota connection, I know Tamara was absolutely the visionary, and Dion was the wheeler dealer who put the people together up here in Minnesota to make it happen. I'm grateful for the connections that Dion reached out to Ruth and to me to make. And of course, Peter was an instrumental part. And as Nora pointed out, both Dion and Peter are no longer with us, but their significance in building this, and thankfully Tabari is still with us, their significance in creating this infrastructure really can't be overlooked. And when you think about giving a hand up, I think of the number of people whose lives here at Minnesota and hopefully at Uruguay, you feel the same way. We're really enriched scientifically and personally by this infrastructure of people that was put in place by the leadership of Tabari and Dan. So when thinking about what we actually have as this legacy, which is a gift from those who came before us, of course, it's the papers, it's the publications, it's the knowledge, but it's ultimately just the people. And I'm just going to very quickly go through what I realize is we don't have a comprehensive list. And I should go back a minute because that's a picture of Nora and of me. We don't have one single comprehensive list of everybody whose lives were touched on either end. And I think that's something important for us to try to memorialize as we move forward, because the network is rich and it's greater than I think any one of us has. I'm going to go quickly. I realize our time is running out to highlight the people that we do know about and a little bit about where they came from and where they ended up. Nora, you were one of the very first. You were one of my, actually, you were my second PhD student co-advised with Neil Anderson. You were a joy to work with and have continued to be a joy to collaborate with in many different ways. Here we have a picture of us when we were young, and here we have a picture of us when we were not so young just a few years ago in Uruguay. In plant pathology, Cecilia Jones got her master's with Debbie Samick. Some of these students might not have formally been under the program, but still became part of this rich network of Minnesota and Uruguayan connections, and seeing where the lives and the career paths of these Minnesota grads have gone has been wonderful to see. And so Cecilia, I remember she was a young firecracker. I think Debbie Samick's first graduate student just a few years back. And of course, Pablo, another heavy hitter. Literally, when I asked the faculty in plant pathology for photos or information, everyone had things to say about the extraordinary quality of these students from Uruguay. And Pablo fits in that space as well. He got his PhD with Brian Stephenson. Recently got the Award of Excellence in International Service from our National American Phytopathological Society, and is currently at the University of Minnesota. And sorry, I didn't point out, of course, you all know Nora's had a rich and impactful career in INIA. Pablo's here as a research scientist. Carlos spanned a few programs. He started with a master's with Ruth Dilmacki and with me, and then went on to a super productive and continuing collaborative scientific relationship with Bob Blanchette. He was a joy in both settings, and he was one who provided some wonderful pictures of his family also at a young age experiencing the Minnesota winter. Sylvia, and I don't know if I have the order of all these students correct. Of course, Sylvia was another impact player, getting her PhD with Ruth, a rich career at INIA. Patricia, a wonderful student again through the Uruguayan connection, came with a really different flavor, a little bit less applied ag focused, but still created a really nice series of publications as she's moved on with her career in Uruguay. Sophia, currently in progress with her PhD with Bob Blanchette, a high flyer, a Fulbright scholar, currently working with INIA. She works to finish that last lap of her PhD degree. Plant pathology has been richly beneficiaries of that US-Uruguayan connection. We've also had, and this is not a complete list, but off the top of our head, we could come up with 3 amazing US-Uruguayan internship experiences. Charlie Barnes, Elizabeth Wiggins, and Justin Stanton were all students that went from the US to Uruguay. Elizabeth Wiggins, again, this is where the network comes into play. Elizabeth Wiggins connected with Carlos and ended up helping stimulate that that connection here, which resulted in something that still hasn't ended over 20 years later. And then we have 2 students or faculty from Uruguay who've come to do internship or collaborative work in Minnesota with Bob Blanchett's lab. I would love to build this out so we have a more comprehensive list. Agronomy students, this was the list that they were able to come up with, going all the way back to PhD in 2000 from Clara Prist with Gary Muehlbauer. No one had any pictures available when I requested them, but of course, this is where we might want to build our network out. Perhaps the students and faculty, some are back in Uruguay, some have stayed in the United States to pursue their careers, some with INIA. Building out this history, I think, would be important for us collectively, because certainly there's a deeper network than many of us realize, even just off the top of our head. Rex Bernardo has a graduate student currently who, as it turns out, he pointed to her master's advisor in Uruguay, who was a long ago, well, not so long ago, but a PhD student in the US previously, that is at Minnesota previously. Independently, Gary Muehlbauer said, oh, you know what? This current PhD student actually was connected via my old PhD student of 2000, 22 years ago, she graduated from Minnesota. So the reality is that there's these connections that we aren't even seeing that are continue to drive the opportunities for collaborative effort. I'm going to have to apologize for students and programs that were not represented. Elena worked on her PhD here with Peter Graham and with Mike Sadowski. Has had another, again, fabulous career with INIA, and has been fun to talk with when I've had the pleasure and the privilege of visiting Uruguay in the past decade. Watching all these students who just go and impact the world has been one of the reciprocal joys of getting old. The other important thing to note is it wasn't just the students that came and went. It was the potential for ongoing collaborations. We had lots of great experiences. I can speak for Ruth and myself and Bob Blanchett and all the plant pathology faculty. I know this is also true for those in agronomy, and Peter in the day loved being in Uruguay. The potential for current and future collaborative efforts to be ongoing is a pretty powerful impact that the long-term U of M Uruguayan connection has had. And now it's up to us. One thing as I put this together, I had a little bit of a concern that we need to bring in more of the young people. There's an older group of us who were here when we started, or the first 5 years, and we all had the joy and the richness of this connectivity. We need to make sure we're bringing in young people, both at the University of Minnesota, young faculty who can continue to drive this program, and within INIA and the universities in Uruguay. And so I hope that we can, through this effort or others, build that network that is leverage what we already have, but build it even bigger by bringing in the next generation of scientists. And so, Nora, thanks for being so inspirational and in motivating us to do that. And with that, I'm really happy to turn the program over to Tabare and Carlos.
Carlos?
Yep,
There we go.
I need a permit.
Oh, yeah, I got you, man.
I need the power.
Oh, yeah, I'll give you a hand right here. You are the one I missed. Okay. There you go. Try now.
Okay.
Classic Zoom follies. Right.
Can you see there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And as Linda said, I think that I am not INIA. I belong to the University of Uruguay, and this agreement that we are celebrating today has been benefit to the whole country, not only to INIA, but to other institutions like the university and other institutions in the country. So I think that it's important to remark that the benefit has drained beyond just INIA, and that is just great. I would try to talk a little bit about that later. But this space, in this space, we wanted to give an idea that we have with Mary, Tabaré, Silvia, to create a chapter of Uruguayan alumni from the CFANS. We know that there are many Uruguayan alumni spread worldwide, and many of them are in contact, but still there are many to be contacted and to have a network and collaboration. And there are many opportunities to be part of the alumni society, with emphasis in connection, alumni to alumni, alumni to college, alumni to students, and alumni to community. And we really like the idea to create this chapter to take advantage of this. Why? Well, because it strengthened the relationship between Uruguayan alumni with CFANS alumni, networking with other CFANS alumni, expanding professional experiences at both ends in Minnesota and Uruguay, enhancing visibility of the college to attract prospective international students, and providing advice and mentorship to current students at the college, and enhancing the university visibility to the community in both ends, like this opportunity that we have today. And for that, everybody is welcome. I know that in the audience there are many young people that could take advantage of this kind of interaction that we have. We, with Silvia and me, are just contact us to get involved. There are the emails, and I just wanted to tell the story of my pathway, because the connections have been incredibly important for my life, my personal and my academic life, and I think that it's good for young people to see how these things work. And so starting with Nora went to Minnesota, encouraged by Tabaré Abadi, who was the first one landing in Minnesota, with both co-advisors, Neil and Linda. And then Nora encouraged Silvia to go to Minnesota with Ruth as advisor. Then both Nora and Silvia encouraged me to go to Minnesota for graduate study. And also I met Elizabeth Vigen in 2003, who was doing an internship in Uruguay. Elizabeth was Linda's student, and she was stimulating me to go there for graduate studies and all the benefits of the university there in Minnesota. Then I went to Minnesota for a master's degree, having Linda and Ruth as co-advisors. After that, I have Bob as advisor of my doctoral degree, or doctoral program. And then it was my turn to encourage somebody else to this wonderful change. And Sophia went to Minnesota, and Bob was her advisor. So no pressure, Sophia, but we are waiting for the next step, the next picture in the chat. But yes, and this pathway is just amazing, and you can see how everybody is connected with everybody, and you can see the same face in different places of the chat. So this is it's just amazing how these things work. And there are many neat pathways to come. I think that we need to stimulate this. Everybody is welcome to take part of this idea of the chapter that we are going to create. this is more than, I know that today is the celebration of the INIA agreement, but as I said before, this is the benefit is long beyond of INIA, and the university has many alumni from Minnesota. The university in Uruguay has many alumni from Minnesota, and Panambi Abadi, who is in the audience, has been, she was in the writing the draft for the agreement of INIA. So everything is connected with everything, and this is what we want to highlight in this occasion. So thank you for this, and well, everybody is welcome to contact us with Sylvia.
Yes, Tanami? Hi.
No te escuchamos, Panambi.
No,
Ahora sí.
listen. Are you listening now?
Yes.
Okay. I am Panambi. Actually, I'm Tavares' sister. But furthermore, I was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, not in the field of agriculture. I am a lawyer, but my career is in university administration, and there at Minnesota, I studied higher education. So not only agronomists go to Minnesota, or veterinarians. I was delighted to help in the matter of building the agreement between Minnesota and INIA. In those times, I was not. I mean, I never worked at INIA, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter. The point was to strengthen the university and the institutions and anybody in Uruguay with Minnesota, because it is magnificent. I think that all of us, we had the wonderful chance of studying in Minnesota, know that it is magnificent. So, as I told you, I'm not only Tavares' sister. In many ways, Tavares inspired me to study in Minnesota, of course. But Minnesota is a wonderful chance for everybody going to Minnesota. I keep Minnesota in my heart. I was there when my only child was 1 year and a half. And I received a wonderful support from other people studying in Minnesota. For instance, Flavio Capetini, who supported me in many ways because I was alone with my child there. And my professors there, my advisor and other professors there were very supportive. I will be delighted to continue working for this linkage. Today, I'm not working anymore at the Facultad de Agronomía, or at least I'm working with few hours. I'm working at the rector's office. And if I can help, I will be delighted to continue helping. My field, which is higher education, in those days was not, we didn't have a lot of people interested in studying higher education. And that's a pity because we need educated administrators. And still, Minnesota is a wonderful place to study higher education. But I think that the disciplines count a lot. And of course, agronomy and veterinary had the critical mass to develop this kind of linkage. There were other people. I was a student, for instance, in 1994, 1995. I did my master's degree in Minnesota. But there were people already studying in Minnesota when I was in the 90s. Of course, this linkage was was stronger after those dates. But well, I think that it could be worth to, for instance, remember that there was a linkage between Minnesota and the University of the Republic called between people who are members of the Partners of the Americas. That's many of us had a lot of support from there. I mean, it was effective support, but it was very important. I see that Tabaré is not around. I don't know why, but I guess that I can represent the family in this occasion. And I will tell him why is it that you're not here? I mean, I've been listening about you. But I'm sorry, I was late and maybe you have already explained why he's not here. But let me tell you, I am the youngest in the family, so I cannot complain and I cannot tell him a lot of things. He will be telling me things. So many thanks for this invitation, and I will be delighted to continue linked with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Elena, did you have a comment to make as well?
Yes. First of all, I'm happy to see so many faces, names that mean so much for me. I don't think it means so much. I mean, it means a lot, but pursuing a PhD program is a life-changing experience for everybody. And I went to the U of M because I was Peter Graham's admirer. I hadn't seen a map ever before 1 or 2 weeks flying over. Then I realized that it was far north, actually, a little bit too much north for me. Anyway, no, I wanted to say, well, I have always Peter's in my heart, but I wanted to mention that one only event that I think pictures somehow that institutions are empty containers. What matters is people. And when Peter passed away, I was shocked. I was already in Uruguay because I got a job in INIA and at INIA, and I needed to come back, and I hadn't finished my PhD. And Professor Deborah Allen stepped in a complicated, in a difficult situation, and came up with the solution. She stepped in as my advisor and built a committee with Linda, Michael Russell, and Diane Larson, and it wasn't easy, but it was extremely rich. So I wanted to mention that as another example of nets and humanity. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, if folks want to stick around, we will have breakout room gatherings where you can connect and share memories. Ruth, do you want to say something else?
Yeah, so we wanted to, we're actually over time at this point, so we recognize that, but we figured that this is a rare opportunity to have so many people together, so we thought that we would just divide into some random breakout rooms for those of you that are in on Zoom, which is most of you. You will be able to move between those breakout rooms, but I would also remind that in the chat, Annie put a link to the Kudo board that we have, and that would be a fabulous place to upload a few words and a picture or two, and that will live on in perpetuity. That becomes a fixed memory, and then we do plan on thinking forward and thinking about ways that we can not only take that alumni, but reinvigorate the partnership that we've developed over this time. And so this won't be the last you hear from us.